And so today is July 22nd, 2016. I'm Larry Morrissey. I'm here with David Morgan. We're in the Arts Commission's conference room in Jackson. But we're here to talk about David's membership, longtime membership at Wells Church. And this is for the Wells Oral History Project. So let's start off, if you could talk just a little bit about your background, where you were born and where you grew up, and then maybe a little about, if your family was religious, what your practice was, and a little bit about that.
Well, I'm a Northeast Jackson brat, born in 1952, and lived in the area that's called Northeast Jackson, except my very first years I was in Broadmoor. Went to public schools in Jackson, including Span. First year Casey opened, Bailey Junior High, and Murrah High School. My family, my parents were religious. Early on we were Methodists, went to Broadmoor Methodist, and then my father decided they were too liberal, so we moved to First Pres when I was in junior high, I guess. And then when I went to college, I left church and religion behind for quite a few years and joined it. Didn't go back really till I joined at Wells in 1987, I believe.
So were you a every Sunday in the pew family, or?
Yep. Had to have our shoes shined and looking good.
So tell me about how you first found out about Wells. What did you know about it before you first attended?
Well, there's hardly anywhere where you can go in the state and drop the name Keith Tonkel and somebody doesn't know him. I first got introduced to him at the funeral of one of my younger brother's friends, Russell Black. Yeah. And then after that, we were searching for a church and had started going to, it's called the Christian Church of the Church of Practical Christianity or something like that, was on Lakeland Drive at that point. And shortly after we got there, the minister moved and the church shut down and declared bankruptcy, so I guess that's a practical way to deal with things. We looked around some more and ended up at Wells, and it was just a good fit. Nice spectrum of people and very welcoming. And so I joined there, I believe, in 1987.
Tell me about your first time attending Wells, what you remember about it.
I don't remember the first time. I remember shortly into it, I was sitting in the congregation, and they called somebody else up, and they were going to lay hands on them, and a bunch of people went up there, and I believe I would have bolted and run at that point, except I was in the middle of the pew and couldn't leave. But it just became very familiar, very loving and accepting place, and so I've gone every Sunday almost since then.
What's the perception of Wells in the community by people who aren't members? What is when you would say, people say, well, where do you go to church? Oh, I go to Wells. What's kind of the reactions that you would get about it?
It ranges from people that have heard of it and are really impressed by it to those that think that we're hardly Christian at all. So we have a very diverse population, including black and white, gay and straight, old and young. And one misperception across the board really is that we have a large African American population, which we don't, although we're right in an inner city African American neighborhood, which there are probably at least 4 churches within stone throw from there, and so the African Americans mostly go there. We have, a handful of African Americans that come there, but it's not hugely that way.
What was the, well, tell me about, like, when you first started attending, did you jump in right away in terms of getting involved, or was that a slow kind of process? And how did you get kind of step from just attending to getting involved in the ministries?
It took a while. I started out being on one of the committees, which I have to think of the name of it. Then I did Children's Church for about 25 years, and have been involved in Habitat for Humanity there. I guess the other major thing would be Wells Fest.
What did you do at Wells Fest? Or what have you done?
Well, the first couple of years, I just volunteered and went wherever they needed me, which it was very interesting. After that, somebody asked me about the children's area. She was the coordinator at that point, I think, and I asked me to come over to her house, and I came over there, and she loaded up about 8 boxes of stuff, and never saw her again. So I, de facto, I guess, became the children's area director.
Talk about that area in terms of what's unique about it, what kind of, it is a very kind of unique thing in terms of how you guys set it up from other festivals.
The things we have in there are not really different from anywhere else, but we just kind of have them set up around a periphery, a circular periphery, and then we have put one of those orange plastic fences behind that, so there's only one way in and one way out. And I have been told that one of the draws is that most everything we have is quite inexpensive. It started out being $0.25 a ticket. It's now 50 cents a ticket. And we have the same things pretty much over and over every year, except when we always have something more expensive, like the climbing wall or gyroscope. But most of it's the same stuff we have every year.
I want to put in the Sandpile was especially a big draw for my sons.
I have to give a nod to Greg Campbell for that. He was the first one that thought of it. He had seen it at, what's the festival he used to have over at Ridgewood or Living? No. But the Blue Cross put it on.
Oh, yeah.
And they had a sand pile like that, and they had stuff buried in it. And we decided to forego the buried in it part because we saw that sand was just could be flung in eyes, and they would be too busy looking for stuff to actually enjoy a sand pile, which apparently kids don't experience hardly anymore. They bring that in a dump truck, and it's about 6 feet high, and we don't do anything to it, just throw some toys in it for them to play with, and at the end of the day, it's about 1 foot tall and 20 feet wide.
That's great. Can you talk about, the Wells Fest is really like Wells' kind of biggest public event in terms of, I'm sure it really helps in terms of just people knowing about the church in general. I want you to talk about kind of its connection, how it bridges to the community in that, and how you've seen it do that, I guess, maybe.
Right. Year after year, we have a lot of the same people and some new people. We like to point out that Wells Fest is all of the proceeds go to a specific charity or social organization each year, which is picked 6, 7, 8 months in advance. Different organizations apply. We have, in the children's area, it takes over 100 people to man that the whole day because they're in 2-hour shifts. And we've had everything from Jackson Prep cheerleaders to ones from various other inner city, Rowan, for example. And so it's had a lot of diverse communities meet there. We're also a drug and alcohol-free festival, which one of our performers a long time back said, yeah, I'm all about that, free drugs and alcohol.
Do you know of any instances where somebody who was an attendee later became a member of Wells, like kind of got introduced to Wells through the festival and then became, I wonder if that ever happened?
I'm sure there are, but I can't think of anybody specifically. But we have become very well known and always have the festival the last Saturday in September, and people look forward to it.
Tell me about Shortens Church, how you got involved with that.
I just signed on with whoever the leader was at the time, and I can't remember who that was either. And gradually they moved out, and then I typically had somebody else that would step in and help me. So it just became a thing that we did once a month, and I stayed with it for 25 years. We've gone from, well, actually I'm not doing it anymore, but I was given a plaque for doing it from the church. But it's grown, it's not grown, it's shrunk considerably over the years. When we first started, we would have 25 or 30 kids, and now we're down to 4 or 5. The families are getting older, and we're not recruiting as many new ones, so that's the way that worked.
And so that is that like the children describe, it's not like, is it Sunday school or what
Well, it's Bible based, just at a children's level. We would use a scripture every week and usually find a children's book that went along with it, or a children's Bible, and then we had question and answer time, and started out having an activity time too, but that got too involved. And then we get up and do silly exercises, and that's typically the way it went.
Was it part of the, did they pull the kids out during service, or was it before the main service, or how did it fit in with the...
No, they announced it about a quarter of the way into the service, and it was neat to see all the kids come running down the aisles. They always looked forward to it.
What are the elements? A lot of people talked about kind of the different elements of the worship service there, and the things that they really, I really liked when we did this, or the different types of music and things like that. And I'm curious in terms of your perspective, what parts of the worship service, or what are the special things? I guess there's different specials that kind of happen every once in a while. What are some that are particular favorites of yours?
Well, we've had a lot of very talented musicians come through there, and some of them have stayed, and I always enjoy that part. We have a wonderful choir and choir director, James Martin. I enjoy them as well. The choir is open to anybody that wants to join. They don't wear choir robes. They just wear whatever they've got on, and that varies from cut-off blue jeans to three-piece suits. It's just part of the diversity of Wells. Another thing I really like is we have communion every Sunday, and once a month we have it at the altar down front, and then the other Sundays you can go to the little portal in the back and take communion, and everyone is welcome. So that's something I really like. We also have a time where people announce what's going on or what's on their mind, or ask for prayers, or just kind of a fellowship time. And often we sing, "Jesus Loves Me."
Have there been many changes to the kind of the service over the years since you first started going there, or has it stayed pretty much the same?
It's been pretty much the same. They've shaken it up a little bit more recently, just kind of switching things around, but still usually about the same things. I guess the biggest difference is that Keith Tonkel is not preaching there full time anymore. He's had some health issues, and we have an associate pastor, John Brazier, who does a great job, and every week we have a lay minister. I like that part of the church too, where somebody from the congregation comes up and does the welcome for the church, makes it more personal. But the biggest change would be that Keith isn't doing as much. I think he just turned 80, but he's still around and has his input.
Is the lay minister, is that something that people volunteer for, or how is that set up?
You can do that. You can ask to be a lay minister a certain month, but in my experience, it's usually somebody calling you up and asking if you'll be a lay minister next week, and I was never able to say no. That's typically the way it works.
So what are other ministries have you been involved with over the years?
I've worked with Operation Shoestring, which is right down the street. We helped start that. Actually, from what I understand, the original version of that was in the fellowship hall at Wells. I've, as I said, done Habitat for Humanity. I've worked with the youth group, the teenagers. Again, Wells Fest and getting that set up and run and taken down. I think that would be the major ones that I've been involved in. Habitat for Humanity, we built quite a few houses on that street.
So is that, I know some of those are kind of like collective efforts with multiple churches. Did you guys have sponsor your own houses, or?
Yeah, it was mostly us, and we had never had any problem coming up with a crew, so it was us and Habitat folks, and we had quite a few talented people in the construction realm too, so it worked out well.
What kind of stuff did you do for that?
Everything from rolling paint to putting on roofs to nailing on siding to just basically whatever needed to be done.
Was there a lot of fundraising as part of that, or how did you guys come up with the matching funds for that?
Well, the understanding is that the family that's going into the house has to put in a certain amount of sweat equity, and then Habitat, obviously is involved in financing too, and I'm not sure where Wells got their money or how they contributed, how that worked.
Tell me about Shoestring and how you got started over there, how you got introduced to that.
I was teaching school in Clinton and Jackson at the time, public school, elementary school, in a gifted program, and so I was very much enjoyed being around younger kids, and thus children's church as well. And every morning at Shoestring they had a devotional time, and I had the summers off because I was teaching, and so I would go down there and do the devotionals fairly regularly and find other people to do them, and that was the way that happened.
So just the devotionals, or did you get more involved over time? Or?
No, it was just the devotionals. I also worked with them through the school system. Wasn't a book buddy because that's one-on-one, but I would go down there once a week in the afternoons and read a book with them.
Well, I'm curious if you think about Wells has been built so much on Keith being the pastor for so long. his identity with the church. And how do you see Wells kind of moving forward when Keith's not going to be here forever, kind of thing?
That's a very interesting conundrum, and we've been talking about it almost since I've been there, because he was in his 60s at that time. It's going to be interesting because there are, I don't know how many people, but a good many that come there because Keith is there and they love the way he does the service and his preaching. And then there are others that come there because they're become so familiar with the community that goes there. And there are those that go there for the social efforts. But I don't know how that's going to work. John Brazier, who is the associate pastor now, for reasons I don't understand, can't be the head minister. I think he'd have to go back and do too much, start over with his schooling. There hadn't been anybody appointed there in over 40 years. So, and typically churches trade out ministers every 3 to 5 years, and Keith has been there again for decades. So it's a different situation, and I don't know. I hope that it survives. I think that it will, but initially I don't think it will be as large. We'll have to build up again.
What have you seen to be kind of the advantages and disadvantages of having such a long-standing pastor?
Well, the advantages and the disadvantages are pretty much the same. You get familiar with somebody, and that can be detrimental or beneficial as the minister or as the staff there, which a lot of them have been there for a long, long time. You hear the preaching, and it's generally grace-focused, which is a great thing. You hear pretty much week after week. I have not been to a church that switched out ministers in 3 to 5 year periods, so I really don't know what that's like. But, we have a lot of things in order at Wells that have been that way for decades and continue to work well, so we don't mess with them.
Don't break what's not broken or whatever.
Right.
So you moved to the Gulf Coast earlier this year, and I'm just curious, is it you can't find another church like Wells, really, that's a kind of a one-of-a-kind church. Are you still going to try to maintain some contact with the church? What do you see, and how do you see your experience kind of affecting where you might attend on the coast?
As far as I know, your statement about there not being another church like Wells seems to be true, and I've heard people that have left there and moved to other towns and just said they couldn't find anything like it. Sally, my wife, and I are still searching around down in the coastal area. We found I guess you would call it a charismatic Catholic church that's very interesting. It's called St. Rose de Lima, and the congregation there is incredibly mixed. I'd say it's a fourth white, a fourth African American, a fourth Cajun, or a mix of black and white, and then a fourth, who knows. But they do wonderful choir, and it's like feels like a mass choir, and it's a very energetic bunch. So we've been there some, but not being official Catholics, there are things that we can't participate in, so we're still looking around. Mm-hmm. As far as what I'll be doing with Wells, I intend to do the children's area again this year, and then I probably will pass the gauntlet on to somebody else. Unfortunately, I don't know if there are very many people that know how it works. particularly the putting together of the arcades and that sort of thing. But, you know, it probably good to have a shake-up there, too. And I have people that have helped me for a long, long time, Catherine Dollarhide and Ann Carges, and they really run the show the day of the show.
You're just the boss man who walks around and
Right, I
puts
just
things right.
try to fix things and pick up trash and make sure kids aren't throwing sand at each other, and man the booths when there's nobody there, and take it down with a lot of help at the end of the day, and pack it up. And,
Is that stuff all stored? You don't have space in Wells for that, right? I mean, is that put somewhere else?
well, all we have is I guess you'd call them the arcade games with wooden structures, and we do keep all of that at Wells in a storage room. The other things are rented. The jumping, what do they call that? A jumping.
Space jump.
Yeah, space jump, and the climbing wall, and the gyroscope when we have it, and the obstacle course, and all of that we don't keep up with.
You still have the ponies, or?
Yeah, the Ponies are a huge hit year after year, and it takes somebody to designate their full time to that particular thing, but because the Pony people bring a couple of their folks, but it just takes a lot to keep that area going, and it's more than anybody else that's working in the children's area you can't do anything else. It just requires that focus. But yeah, the families love it.
Yeah, I remember waiting in line for that for a while. So yeah. Well, are there other things that we haven't talked about, we haven't touched on, that you feel that, I don't know if you think about the theology, kind of the overall theology of Wells, and the kind of overall, you know, what you've kind of pulled out of it personally on a kind of a faith kind of thing? Maybe you could talk just a little about that.
Sure. Well, Wells is very much grace-based, and a lot of Keith's sermons relate to that. It's, as the congregation reflects, we're not a very judgmental church. We have quite a variety of folks there, which is something that I really like. We have a wonderful choir service at Christmas every year, and an amazing number of talented musicians that will play during the service, 2 or 3 at a time. All of those things are things that I have really liked about it over the years, and just having that family and community has become very special. One of those musicians is Chris Gill, who plays around town. And then we have had what's called Wells Talent Night for 15 years, I guess. So people get a chance to go up and show their talents, which often nobody ever knew about before. So they're singing and joke telling and dancing and instrument playing and all kinds of things. So that's pretty neat.
Have you ever done that yourself?
Oh yeah, I've played harmonica, and I've played harmonica with a group, and I have done blues recitings with a drum in the background. I've done a monologue, which was quite unusual for me. I don't think anybody expected it. It was a serious thing, which, you know, all of my others had been pretty goofy. But it's just nice to have that opportunity.
Yeah, surprise people.
Mm-hmm.
That's great. Well, David, I don't have anything else to ask you. Before we shut down, if there's anything else that you wanted to mention, otherwise I think we'll send you on your way.
Well, I thank you, and I see on one of your governor's awards for excellence in here that Wells Church is on it.
That's right.
We appreciate y'all's support.
Absolutely.
And this program you're doing now is through the Mississippi Humanities Council, right?
That's correct.
Which I am still working for part-time, and they're a great group, too. That's all I can think of.
Okay. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.